So this is the first podcast for Save the Square, and we have George Hansel, the mayor of Keene, here today with us, and Dory Maston, the owner of the Poorhouse, and we're here to talk about, I don't know, what's happening in Keene, Save the Square, infrastructure, redesign of the square, and blah, 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 all of that stuff. So who wants to go first? Who wants to open this up?
I can open it up with just a little background on the project.
Sounds good to me.
Sort of set the table. How do we get here?
Awesome.
And this actually goes back over 100 years when the first, some of the infrastructure we're using right now is under the ground and was installed over 100 years ago. I was told, there are actually logs under the ground. They used to core out logs and sort of sharpen one side like a pencil and whack it into the other one. And that was how they put water pipes together back then. And believe it or not, we still have some of those pipes in service today in certain places on Main Street and throughout the city. And so we have some aging infrastructure, stuff that's been layered on top of each other over the years and all this stuff. And so this infrastructure project's been talked about since I've been involved with the city, really. So it's got to be over 10 years. And every time we talk about it, we try and figure out how to move forward with the project. There's never a good time for a big project like this. And so it's been attempted over the years. Mayor Lane brought this forward to try and iron out what would happen and move the project ahead. But it was backed off at that point because of some public pushback. And unfortunately, I'm the lucky mayor that sort of has to deal with it. I've been told we're at the end of the road as far as kicking the can goes. It's up against the curb and we've got to deal with this. And so we're in the process of having this community discussion, and it's very important. This is going to be a disruptive project for downtown for sure. I don't think it's anything that I don't think anybody wants this per se, but it's something we have to deal with, and it's an important decision because it will have impacts on how we move forward as a city. So there are strong feelings out there. There are ideas that have been percolating for years. There are folks that have lived here for decades that feel very strongly one way or another. And so my job in this whole process is really just to facilitate this conversation, try to get us to a point where maybe not everybody's happy, because I think that's probably unlikely, but to the point where we evaluate all these options and we or the city council makes a well-informed decision. So that's really my goal.
Okay. So, I think that we need to, I think everybody needs to look at this two ways, right? I think one, there is an infrastructure problem in the city. And just let me preface this. My name's Aaron Kelly. I'm friends with both of these individuals. I had a business here in town for a long time. I really don't have a dog in this hunt, but I'm here to help everybody through the process, give people a platform to talk on. So there is that. But I personally see this as two separate issues, right? I see infrastructure, if it needs to be replaced in town, then yeah, great, replace it, right? Because that's what's going to keep the city rolling for the next 100 years, right? Infrastructure under the ground is what, 75 years old? Last time it was redone. You have introduction. Okay.
Over 100.
Over 100. So then you've got technology issues, right? People don't have access to fiber optic broadband internet, right? So you want to connect all the businesses on Main Street, fiber, broadband, blah, 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 so that businesses can continue to thrive and evolve with technology. So there's that. I don't think we disagree on any of that stuff.
Well, some people do, but you're hitting the nail on the head in one respect, is that the question of whether or not the project needs to take place is not really a question or a decision. Like from the evidence that I've seen, like we have to deal with the infrastructure under the street. If we don't, you run into real problems where whole blocks of Main Street could not have water, not be able to flush the toilets or operate commercial kitchens or that kind of stuff. You also have potential for like sinkholes in the middle of the Main Street, which nobody wants.
No, so I think that Dory probably agrees with that. I think the majority of the business owners in Keene probably agree with infrastructure replacement. But I think the bigger issue has been what's out in front of us or behind us right now is the square, right? And the parking issues and, changing it and making it a larger green space and all that stuff. And then how that's going to affect people in this vicinity, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's 805 parking spots in Keene. Yeah, that's great. Awesome. But how many are up here and how many are going to get lost? And I think that's where I think the bigger picture is that's the main issue, right? Dory, I mean, help me out here. Where are you at in this whole thing?
I think there are many different issues. But, a couple of the top ones are necessity. We don't need to change the downtown. We don't have a safety issue. We don't have a traffic issue. Some folks will say, oh, getting through there is terrible. Well, go to the city and do some studies, because Keene doesn't have a traffic issue. And if our cars are, if we're at Main Street at the head of the square and we have to wait in our line in our cars to Church Street, that's not a problem. That's just getting through town. So changing the lanes to me and to many others is not necessary. Town works fine. The square is historic. It's beautiful. It's been in magazines, newspapers, it's been on radios, television shows. Our common is so eccentric and beautiful, historic, it shouldn't change. And to me, shame on whoever even brought the idea. This is gorgeous.
Well, one thing I would say is that everyone I've talked to since this process began has made it very clear that they want to preserve the look and feel of downtown. I think no one's come up to me and been like, this downtown stinks and we want to get rid of it. We want to take away the gazebo and the statues, and we want to pave it over and make something totally different. No one is saying that. Yeah. And I don't want to get ahead of the city council, but I doubt that they would ever choose any option that did that. I think with these upcoming workshops that are coming up January 30th, everybody should write down January 30th, starting at 5 is sort of the walk-around period, formally starting at 6.
At the library.
At the library. That'll be a good opportunity for us all to get a better feel for some of these options, right? So the consultant is working hard to do some visualizations of these various options from like the street level and overhead, and try to give people a better sense of like what this is really going to look like. If you're concerned about the look and feel of downtown being lost, then let's make sure that doesn't happen, right? And so I think that's the feedback that, well, Stantec heard the feedback from the public so far, and I think they're trying to respond to that, and hopefully that comes out in the workshops.
Cool. So I want to reference some articles that have kind of come out in the paper, right? I mean, they're there, and I think a big one, maybe a concern for a lot of people, and especially on the SaveTheSquare.org site, that there's an online petition. People are leaving comments, and we've had over 400 in since we launched the site. 5 days ago. And I think a lot of the concern and comments that we read in there is the process of this, right? Because you've kind of taken this in a different route than projects normally go of any size, right?
Not really. So it's very typical to use a steering committee to work with a consultant one-on-one for the initial sort of design. Because what happens with one of these things is you have a universe of ideas out there, unlimited potential, all this stuff. And you've got to get it to the point where a city council with a reasonable amount of information can sort of choose. And so there's a whole process that the city goes through to do that, public output to get the universe of ideas sort of established. You do design charrettes and various different tools, get everything on the table. And then the steering committee usually works with the consultant to sort of narrow things down. Like one thing that came up at our first meeting, or one of the first meetings, was, we could do parallel parking downtown. Like, that's an option. That's something that could be done. And everybody on the steering committee was like, heck no, we're not doing that. Let's throw that one in the bin right now. And so, and I would think that, almost no one's come to me and said, I want parallel parking. So I think that was a good thing. So we've narrowed down some of those things that were just not feasible. Like, we knew right off the bat, we didn't even want to spend any more time on. And then the steering committee narrowed down to a few options that we find viable, right? Obviously, keeping it the same is viable. It's like it is right now, and it's functioning. But there are some other. I don't know. I think I want to get.
Do you have trouble? Have you ever seen?
I think there are reasons.
Have you ever seen an accident?
There are definitely reasons to look at some alternatives. I don't think anyone would claim that like what we have now is the best and doesn't deserve to look at anything else.
For as long as you've lived here, have you ever seen an accident on Central Square?
I don't know. It depends on what you're trying to achieve, Dory. I mean, I think some of the motivations...
That's an easy question. For as long as you've lived here, George.
Well, let me continue with my train of thought, because the question was about the process and whether this was terribly different or anything like that. So the steering committee came up with various options. kind of narrowed it down. And now the city council has the challenge of weeding through those options, talking to the different constituents, talking to the public, hearing concerns. You know, there still may be opinions and experiences and people out there that haven't been queued into the project yet. Maybe like a building owner halfway down Main Street is just getting into this now, and there's a compelling reason why they need this many parking spots in front of their business, something like that. So we're trying to create the opportunity for those concerns to come up so we can build them into the project, tweak things, do all that, and then ultimately the city council will decide what it wants to do. And we can move on to the bigger challenge, which is to get all of the businesses through the construction period. This is going to be very disruptive. I don't think many people understand how a construction project of this size and scope really works. It's not like digging out a little trench and replacing a pipe. I mean, you need staging areas, it's going to be disruptive, it's going to be long, it's going to be difficult, and our entire community and the city government has to come together to try and figure out how do we make sure that the businesses survive this construction and that downtown resembles what we remember when it's all done, regardless of what gets put back.
But we're planning something, and we're planning on closing down parts of Main Street. So we say 3 years, likely 5, like any other project city's ever done. We say 7 million, likely going to be 12, because that's always how that works. But we're coming out of a pandemic. Businesses in downtown are just getting back on their feet. I'm fortunate enough to own the building my business is in, but not everybody has that option. There are little stores all over, well, I'll go ahead and say the majority of all the stores and small businesses in downtown Keene are against this project. Not only are we against it for the reasons of the pandemic, we're against it for the traffic reasons, we're against it for safety reasons, we're against it for aesthetics. By saying you had a steering committee, which my own daughter was on, there was never one fully attended steering meeting. We had people on the committee that never showed up to one meeting. We have a real estate owner who's selling all of his real estate, and I don't believe they attended the meeting. This steering committee was made up of how many? 15 people? 10 people?
Something like that.
Yeah. They gave their input. Stantec came out. Stantec did, their $160,000 public relations stunt that didn't get anywhere. Save the Square came out. We spent less than $300 on Facebook ads, and we've gotten, close to 1,200, if not 1,300 followers.
And that's great. And that was always intended to sort of happen that way. The steering committee, in my mind, really accomplished what it set out to do. Whether or not everybody showed up or whatever, it accomplished what I think it was set out to do, which was to put some viable options on the table and sort of narrow things down.
The steering committee
yes, they did.
The steering committee, Stantec came up with the designs. Stantec only had 85 responses from their public output. 85, George.
So the only complaint that you could have is that there are ideas that got missed or didn't get put on the table at this point. No. Because the process was always intended to operate like this, and then it goes to the city council. I mean, the ultimate people who are making a decision still are reviewing this, and the public process is starting, and I think that's a big misconception.
You're not letting me finish.
People think that this is behind.
Judge, can you let Dory finish her comment? Sure. And you can respond to that. Thanks.
And I'm trying not to do to you what I did to Remy. I am trying not to interrupt you, which I did to Remy several times. So I'm trying not to do that to you. So steering committee then brings it, and we do, the city has a few meetings here and there. And now we're going to a public workshop. Public workshop's great. Great idea. Which Save the Square probably caused that public workshop, because I don't recall it was scheduled until the community members had a fit and found out the real cost.
I did it. I can tell you this again. It was always intended to happen like this.
So we still have public workshops. That's great.
Yes.
It's going to be great. Where everybody's going to, bring their displays and whatever. Then the next step is city council. That's not the next step. You know it. I know it. Community knows it. You're skipping a process that you know you won't win.
No.
And that is bothersome. You're not being transparent to the community.
No, actually, it's the exact opposite. We're trying to be transparent and fair to everybody. The city council has to decide on these things. And so every city councilor should have an equal hand in developing the recommendation that they ultimately have to vote on.
George, in 60 years, however many years it is, why do we have this procedure if you're going to violate it to basically
Not
get
violating
your way?
anything. We're taking advantage
It's
of
the process.
a tool in the toolbox to handle a very large and complex project. Like, how often do we tackle something like the downtown that has the complexity and the level of detail and everything like that?
What does MSFI stand
And
for?
the really important thing is to make sure that every city councilor, who ultimately is going to be accountable for the decision that they make, has an equal hand in developing this recommendation. I think that's super important. And I can tell you from my experience in the city, if you want to get every city councilor there, you have to schedule a meeting where they have to be there.
Well,
Otherwise, you
shame on
won't
them.
have people come.
That-
Yeah, shame
I
on
mean,
them, but I'm
shame
trying.
on them, but that's not the public's problem. That's not our problem because we can't get those that represent us in the
From
same
my
room.
perspective, the difficulty and the thing that I'm trying to accomplish is get to the point where the city councilors are well informed. They get as many opportunities as possible to listen to their constituents and the public, hear this information so they can make a well-informed decision. That's my only dog in this fight, so to speak.
George, MSFI
So I'm working to do
is
that
where
all the
it goes.
time.
It's where it goes. It's always how it goes. And you're skipping MSFI because you know they will not recommend it to full council.
No.
If there was an MSFI meeting, if there was one, every city councilor that has an interest in this project could attend that meeting. They could ask questions. The public can ask questions, and you can call Stantec in. By skipping MSFI and going directly to city council, the public can't speak.
No,
You've
that's
skipped-
not true.
What do you
It's
mean?
not true. The public could speak at the committee of the whole.
The
At the-
MSFI.
At the
public can speak, or-
MSFI, the public can
The public
speak at a
the
city.
public could speak at the quasi committee of the whole too.
But that's not, I don't think that's what she's asking, George.
But
I
the
think
question-
the question is if this went to MSFI, right?
Yeah.
And all the counselors were there, and your 5 counselors, Greenwald, Filio, Williams, Catherine Workman, there's another one, Chris, I'm drawing a blank, but all the other counselors could be at that meeting, right? And then the public could be at that
They
meeting.
could, but the other counselors wouldn't be able to participate if there are like changes that are being
Why can't they?
considered because they don't
They can speak.
they don't have a vote to say they wanted to implement a compromise or something like that. They wouldn't have a chance to do that.
But they
And
could.
so
But
they would at a committee of the whole. So basically you're involving the entire council, giving everyone an opportunity with varying ideas to contribute
Have
in
we ever done it
developing the
before?
recommendation.
Have we ever
which is
done it?
really
So,
important.
and I think that's the question, though, George. I mean, listen, this is just trying to be.
And I
open
want to put a
transparent.
disclaimer out there too, is it's ultimately up to the council. The process needs
No, it's
to
up
be,
to the constituents, right?
well, no, the voting on the process, how the council deals with it, they're going to be the ones voting on it. I'm presenting them options. I can give my own opinion. I think this is the best way so that we don't disenfranchise these varying opinions on what should happen. Both Councilor Filio and Councilor Greenwald have made their position very clear. Okay. And in some ways that disqualifies them from being a facilitator for this recommendation. In my mind.
Taking out the 2 that would be against you. That's humorous.
It's
gonna
not against me. I'm not
we're gonna
for
skip
or against any of
procedure,
this.
And then we're going to take out 2.
No, it's about defending everyone's right to have
You
a
are
seat at the
taking
table.
away their right by skipping MSFI.
No, I am not.
You are.
They have
You're
an
not
equal
being
opportunity. They have an equal opportunity to contribute to the process as the other city councilors.
If the public is saying go to MSFI, how come it's not going?
The
Because
council's
you
going
don't
to
want it
decide.
to. Because you don't want it
I
to.
need to bring to the table some tools and ways for the council to deal with this. I think this is a more fair way because you'll have every counselor involved.
You're
and ultimately
violating
they have to.
procedure.
No, I'm not. It's in the rules. You can do this.
You can do whatever you want, and that's the problem. That's what's happening.
The city council
s-
votes on it, by the way. So
I
all I
think-
do is present things. The city council
Every
decides what
time
to do.
it's MSFI. It's literally infrastructure is in it.
The
That's
only
the
reason
name.
you would want that is to give 2 counselors who have made their positions very clear a larger voice and ability to manipulate the process.
But
Okay, but that's why
I'm working
that's why
against
you
that.
don't want it.
Yes, I am working against that.
That's
Because I need everybody, every point of view at the table with an equal opportunity to weigh in.
But you're saying the reason you're skipping MSFI, you just said it, is because you know two people definitely disagree with you.
And so people that disagree with you, Dory, from the public,
I'm not the mayor, and
Listen,
I'm not spending $7 million.
and I'm not ultimately going to decide on this. So I'm just
You
trying
are.
to make
You're
it equal.
skipping process because you can.
No, I can't actually. The city council has to vote on whatever way they want to do it. We're presenting this as an option. It's
Everything goes to
available in the rules.
MSFI. Even Remy said on the square.
And it
Dory,
may.
you don't want it to go there because you know we don't have the votes. You're
It may.
exactly right.
It may. It could be both. It could do both.
Then do
we
it.
could start out and it's
Let it
not
go to
up to me. It's up to
MSFI.
the city council.
Let's go to MSFI.
No. I think there
No,
are
exactly,
very good
no.
reasons to go to the quasi committee of the whole because it gives every counselor a shot and it doesn't disenfranchise people who disagree.
So if MSFI makes a recommendation not to do it, city council can still override it.
They could.
So why not do both? Why not do both?
It could
Because
be.
it
It
seems
could
fair.
go to both. But I
It
think
is-
it makes sense to
it is-
start out
this-
with the
George,
whole
It
committee.
does not make sense. You're
And then
skipping
have,
procedure.
have
It's not.
people who want to weigh in, who may
You're
want
not
something
being
different.
transparent at
That's
all.
absurd.
I think it really goes to process though, because if you read the document that Stantec came back with, right? I have it right over there. I mean, it says that, this will go to MSFI. Then after MSFI's approval or disapproval, whatever, it would go to another meeting and there would be workshops and that kind of stuff. So I think the frustrating thing, not just for Dory, but for a lot of other people, is that it would appear, right? Again, I'm just trying to add some light to this, that you're removing a portion of the process that would otherwise always normally be there, that's always been there for however long. I mean, I've talked to
Councilor
lot of
Remy said that's
counselors
the way
and-
it's supposed to go too.
This
Yeah.
is not a typical project. I think
It's
there's
more
different-
important.
It
It's
is
$7
exactly.
million.
Exactly, which is why we have to put in extra efforts to get the public's input, which is why we should
You're skipping
allow the
public
whole
input.
council to be involved. Like that's what we're trying to accomplish here. And you can attack me all you want about it, but I've found tools within the rules
You
that will
skipped it to
facilitate
manipulate it.
additionally. No,
You're
I'm keeping it from
manipulating
being
the
manipulated
process.
actually.
You are manipulating the process.
So I'm trying to be a fair referee essentially and keep it from being manipulated. So it's the exact opposite of what you're
So if you think MSFI is a tool to manipulate city council, why is it there? This is the way we've always had it, but we're changing it for you.
Well, usually not for me. This is the city council's decision.
So the city council said, let's remove MSFI.
Absolutely
from
did
the
not.
They will
process.
need to vote whether to go into a quasi committee of the whole and do it. I'm
Yeah.
presenting some options, and they'll either vote for it or they won't.
So have you guys given any thought to maybe doing a special vote on this for the public of all the residents of Keene to, what if you just had a,
So with a project like this, it would be very difficult to put it like on the ballot because there are so many different options and ways to pull this together. I mean,
We
other
can do
than
our own
other
research.
than do the project, don't do the project, which might be an easy ballot thing to do, which I don't really think that's the question here. We're talking about design options, which are pretty complicated. It's like it could be a blend of both keep it the same and
Could be
some of the
infrastructure
new
only.
stuff. It could be a lot of different things.
The public can do their own homework. At least 90%
And
of
it's
the
not
community
that's,
doesn't want
the
it.
city. We're set up as a city government with representatives. We actually have 15 city councilors, which is the most, I think, of any city or town in the state. So we have a lot of representation here.
yeah, I think it's just from me looking outside in. I mean, I think there's the infrastructure piece and then I think there's that piece. And I think that is the piece right there that is garnering the most animosity or positivity. I think there's positivity and animosity on both sides.
You
Some
know what?
people
You
really
want my
it.
quick take on it?
Yeah, let's go.
And again, I don't care. They could decide if they decide tomorrow they wanted to put back exactly what's there. Fine, let's move on. Let's get to whatever. But what I see in the community, being essentially an objective observer, is that you have some people who are very committed to just keeping things the same. They want to see Keene remain the same for the next 20 years, and that's fine. And there are reasons for that. I get it. But then you have another constituency of people that are looking 20 to 30 years and trying to implement some changes to make Keene something else, to make it a little different, to grow what we have here. That's the main conflict here that I see.
But I think it's two separate issues. I think everybody agrees on infrastructure, broadband, water, right? Not having sinkholes in Main Street. But I think this is the other issue. I think it's two separate issues. So why not look at it on two separate?
They are separate issues. However, they're connected because when you redo the infrastructure, you're taking up everything.
So if
building face to building face.
So what is it?
That doesn't seem like
so you have to put
enough.
back stuff new.
Okay, so what?
Whether
don't
it's
have to
new,
change
it could be the same design, but it's going to be new.
So let's look at this for a second. Just infrastructure alone. What is actually in the square for infrastructure? You have what? A water pipe to fill the fountain, and electricity, right?
There's a sewer drain that runs diagonally through Central Square.
Okay.
And then there are.
The diagram says it's a water line. That's not the same?
I think it's sewer, but I could be mistaken on that.
It's
well, there's water too.
I believe it's
there's
only
water.
6 feet deep.
There's
Can
water
be done
out
with
there.
A shovel.
But I mean, that is a big misconception because a project like this, like I said at the very beginning, it requires staging. Like this is disruptive, and like this is not something where you can just trench out a water line at your house and put a new one down and then carefully pack it back and it's done. This is going to be a mess, frankly, and it's going to take up a lot of space. It's going to be disruptive, and I don't mean to do that to like scare people. I think that's just a reality. If you've seen this scale of infrastructure project before, that's what's going to happen.
And businesses
so we have
are going to close.
And we have to learn how to figure that out. I talked to a guy in Concord because Concord went through a similar sort of project several years ago, and I talked to one of the retail businesses down there last week when I was over there, and he said, yeah, it was terrible, but the city did a good job of working with us to figure out, how to get people to the store during the construction phase.
Is there one idea that you have that's going to financially reimburse us for our loss?
We're going to have to come up with some ideas.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone's going to
before the plan.
I think that's what you're mainly upset about is just the fact that the project's happening and you don't like that, which
Absolutely
I get.
not.
I don't like it either. I mean,
I wouldn't
think
have
we're
done
in agreement
homework on
there.
the length of a school bus, the length of a fire truck, the turning radius. I'm concerned about all of it. Am I concerned about my business? Yes, but this bar is only one of my businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I care about all small businesses.
Me too.
You're not showing it.
So what?
That's ridiculous.
How are you showing it?
How am I showing it? We're going to have to. That's the second process that I'm getting really people geared up for, hopefully, which is how do we save downtown through the construction? That is going to be the biggest challenge and the part that requires the most effort. I hope as many people who are interested in showing energy around these design options comes out for that, because that's the real important part. We're going to have to raise money. We're going to have to raise money and figure out creative ways and financing through
wishful thinking.
The state and the local municipality. We have to do whatever we can, because that's going to be the difficult part. These design decisions, not to minimize them, they are important, but that is the tip of the iceberg. The big part is how do we come together as a community to support the businesses in the downtown.
So how do you do that? I mean, so just infrastructure piece alone, you dig up all the sidewalks, you have to reconnect sewer, right? Update all that stuff between buildings and the new infrastructure piece, right? Because obviously you don't want to have a failure in a building after you've just done all this great work, right?
Sure.
How do you come up with those plans? I mean, how do you pull in outside consultants? Do you query the business owners?
So the chamber is going to step up to help quarterback some of this stuff, but it's going to be the entire community. I mean, it's going to be going out and describing what's happening to the Rotary clubs and the Lions Club and getting the college involved, getting everybody we can, getting generally the community to buy gift cards from the downtown businesses. I mean, this is what we're talking about.
It worked real well during the pandemic.
It's going to have to be 10 times what happened during the pandemic. I mean, this is just the reality.
It didn't happen, is my point.
Well, then I hope you'll be a positive contributor to making it happen, because it has to happen.
So does the infrastructure all happen at one time? Does all of Main Street get dug up all the way around at one time?
So they're talking about another big part of this is we have to hire a really good contractor, because we need someone with experience doing a project like this, and we need to get down to that granular level of detail. And ultimately, that's going to be the contractor and the engineers working with the individual businesses and figuring that out. But I know Concord had like an ombudsman, basically, like someone who is kind of a clerk of the works for the project, but also was in direct contact with all the affected businesses and property owners, like throughout construction. So those are some ideas. I mean, that's going to be a huge Herculean effort, but something that's really critical.
Cool.
What about all the businesses that don't want the change? We're the ones being most affected. You're taking away all the parking in front of the stage. The stage has come out publicly and said, I am not for this.
So there are a couple of compromises that I think will come up based on the public feedback so far and things that have come up. I pushed back on the consultants and I said, you need to come up with a way, like, is there any possibility that you can implement these potential changes? Because it could go any direction, right?
It could happen or it could not happen, right? I mean,
I think the project is going to happen no matter what.
The infrastructure.
They're connected. I mean, the project is going to happen. They're either going to put back exactly what's there, or they're going to put back some variation of one of these ideas or the ideas themselves.
So what if?
So let me finish my thought.
Yeah, no problem.
So I said to the consultants, I said, figure out, is there any way that we can bring forward a compromise solution that would be no net loss to parking? And they think that that's a possibility. So I'm hopeful that like something like that will come out. There may be some compromises to keep the parking in front of the stage and the church and that kind of stuff. I mean, none of this is set in stone. I hope people realize that. And we're still working with individual businesses and working with people to sort of try to make special accommodations. And there's still a lot of public process to go. These hearings and the workshops are going to be great opportunities for people to come in and say, hey, I can't have this parking spot in front of my building go away because of whatever reason. There are opportunities to still hear that. I know that there are stories and testimony out there that's going to be important and is going to be implemented in the design of this project. So I'm just asking people to just bear with the process a little bit. I know it's tedious. I know it's cumbersome sometimes, but this is the best way that we've been able to come up with to do this and get the whole community to maybe find some consensus, and make sure that it's fair for everybody, because there are a lot of different viewpoints on this. And one thing I want to make sure of is that no one is boxed out of the process. And I want to make sure that no loud voices are bullying this community into picking one way or another. That's just not fair. That's not how we do things here in Keene.
That's how you see Mitch. Isn't that what you said? As bullying the community? What is it when you and Remy
I don't want anyone to bully any community.
What is it called when you and Remy come out to a protest and you talk to everybody?
Listening.
Now you could talk, George. You can be out there and you can
that's
talk.
That's pretty much my job. I go to a lot of protests because
but you were out there with a city
usually
councilman.
why people protest is so that they can be heard and they can have their opinions.
But you were out there with a city councilor, one that agrees with you, who is like your cult follower.
I think you're setting things up in a way that.
But you couldn't come here today if Randy was
disingenuous.
here. What's the difference? Because Randy disagrees with you, but out on Central Square, Remy doesn't. Right?
It doesn't matter. I don't know. I don't control what counselors do. I went to both of your protests because I wanted to hear from the people that were there and hear what they had to say.
We invited Randy, and then we had to disinvite Randy.
It's not appropriate for me. I can
you did
debate
on Central Square with Remy.
My whole goal is to educate people, provide information, all that stuff. It's not appropriate for me outside of the public process to be debating finer points of one option or another with a city councilor.
You did on Central Square with
So would you be open to doing it with all of them?
We will be at the city council process within the public.
But not at MSFI,
in the public process.
where people can talk.
I won't. The city council will be debating.
So will all of those be audio and video recorded and televised and all that? Just
like every official meeting. And that's an important part because we have 91A requirements. It's a public process, and I'm a facilitator for the process. It's not appropriate for me to be debating one-on-one finer points of this stuff that's going to be part of the public record.
You can do it with Remy because he agrees with you.
I wasn't doing it with anybody.
You were out during the protest with Councilor Remy.
He can come to any protest, or it's public. It's a public right away.
You came together. You left together.
I went to every event. I want to hear what people have to say. I'm trying to educate people on the process and answer their questions. That's my job.
How can you answer questions when you won't allow it to go to MSFI so the public can speak?
The public can speak. We're creating lots of opportunities for the public to speak.
At two workshops.
And the
But we
committee of
can't
the whole.
go
Sure.
to MSFI, the people that you
All of the-
put on
all
that,
of the
you
people-
selected those people, did you not, to be on MSFI?
Yeah, and all of those
Those-
people will be there.
They're
No matter
the
what.
ones that know the process. They know what the requirements are.
Those are hollow arguments. I'm sorry.
How are they
I think
hollow? You
uh,
selected them.
Hold on. I mean, you got to see this from her standpoint.
No,
You don't have to.
I don't see it from.
So I
her
mean,
standpoint.
every other project in 60 years has gone through MSFI, but now this one's not.
It
I mean,
could.
every single project that has ever been spearheaded by the city of Keene has gone through MSFI,
Especially
and
on
this
this
one's not.
magnitude.
It very well could end up going through MSFI. It's up to the council, but I think we need an alternative because this is a large, complex project with a lot of public interest and varying viewpoints.
Which
And I
is
don't want to
more
give.
reason.
And you know what? Maybe in the past, counselors who were on these committees didn't dig in their heels before the public process took place. And
I think
I
it's
would-
really just a
and-
process issue. I think
all of
that
them did.
it's always gone through this
And it
process,
doesn't-
and now it's not going through. So
It could. It
optically, people could construe that as something different, maybe like Dory has or other counselors have.
They
I'm
can
just
construe it any way they
listen,
want.
I
but
appreciate you coming on the
ultimately-
show, but
ultimately-
and talking, but that's like historical, George. Like it's always gone through
Procedure.
MSFI. It's procedure. This
Whenever
is the
anyone
first
says
time
this
it
is
hasn't.
we're doing this because it's the way we've always do it, it always throws up red flags for me.
It's a red flag that
approaching
you're skipping
we're
it.
approaching this
huge one.
project, which is large, unusual. It's not every year that we do something as significant as renovate the entire
More reason.
downtown and Main Street.
So what other major projects that have happened in the city of Keene in the last 20 years haven't gone through MSFI? I mean, that's, I guess, question of the day.
Why do it just because that's how it's been done in the past? If we
Because
can come
it's
up with a
process.
better tool,
Because it's procedure.
this
That's
is
why
procedure.
We have
It's
it.
working within the procedure.
No, it's not. You're skipping it.
It's in the rules. They're not skipping anything. And ultimately, it's the council decides. They have to vote how they want to deal with this. And so my job is to present them with some options that
Who
I
made
think
the decision not to go to
that I think
MSFI?
the council could still send it to MSFI if they want.
Who made the decision to skip it?
It's not skipping anything.
Who made it? Is.
I bring forward options that are within the rules, and the council decides what they want to do.
So obviously, this is beating a dead horse on MSFI. I don't think we're going to get over this hump. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think it is what it is, right? I mean, where is it?
I am very confident, and I will defend all day long, that the quasi committee of the whole, having all of the councilors engaged from day one and able to have their input heard, it takes away the political maneuvering that could happen with this important project, which does no one any good. And it also gives the opportunity to every opinion and every point of view, so that ultimately they can all be at least invested in whatever decision is made. I don't want at the end of this process people to look back and say, hey, I was boxed out. I felt like I wanted bike lanes and I wasn't able to have the proper amount of input on the final result. That's not what anybody wants, no matter how you feel on it. And so that's my thinking. That's why I've sort of brought forward some of these ways to move forward to hopefully keep everybody engaged and get everybody to the end result.
Sure. So, you've got 15 elected council members, right?
So they should all be
And
there.
they should all be there. And then the public will be able to voice their opinion on the project, right?
Yep.
And then what if the overwhelming majority of the public says, hey, we don't want to change this. We understand you have to do infrastructure, but we don't want any changes made to that. Will these council members take those people's votes, their constituents' votes?
I don't know.
And
It's up
say-
to the
I mean,
city
but that's-
councilors. And then ultimately they're accountable at the next election.
Well, right, exactly. I mean, I think that's what the public's fearful about too. Is like, does my opinion matter? Is my voice going to be heard, or is somebody just going to make a decision based on their own?
It really does matter, because especially in this case, I don't see it as a one or the other. I think there are going to be some compromise. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of the council and their input and the way that
Understandable.
they do this stuff, but I foresee this not being a one or the other situation. I think there will be some tweaks. I think we'll all learn a lot about why there could be improvements. We'll all learn a lot about why we should keep things the same and what elements we should keep the same. So you just got to bear with the process. It took me 6 months to sort of settle with the scope of the project, like what the reality was and some of this stuff. And I can tell you, I had very visceral reactions to some of this stuff when I first heard it. And it takes a long time to sort of settle and educate yourself on this. And so I know that the public is going through that process. I know emotions are high, but they just got to bear with us. And hopefully we'll all be in a better place to decide in a couple months here.
All right. So in a couple of months after all this, can we have you back and we can sit
Sure.
down again and go through this? I think it's great transparency. I mean, I commend you for coming in here and doing this. I mean, it's, I know it's not easy. I mean, Dory's really passionate about this. I think the public is too, but I think it's great for the public to be able to hear from you on, a community-based kind of podcast.
And I've always tried to go for transparency and listening to the public, and I'm making myself accessible. So this is a good way to do that.
Okay. All right. Well, I think.
Wait, before we end it.
Well, I was just going to give you the floor, so have at it.
So we make these proposals. We hire Stan Tech at their ridiculous rate, and we say, come up with whatever proposal you think is best for our downtown. And then it goes to the steering committee, and, they all think about it. We are bringing this to a public workshop without a safety study? That's my question. Seems to me, and I've looked at the website and the maps, and I've messaged Cord Bloomquist. I looked for measurements on the city website, and I've looked for it on Stantec. There's measurements on one of the plans for how the central square is right now. But when you pull up the proposed one, there's no measurement. Do you think the public realizes that, for one, it's not a roundabout, it's a eggabout, or whatever you call it, and that it's basically the same size as the one at the hospital, except now we got 5 lanes of traffic going into it?
No, I think you have to, those are good questions to bring to the workshops and ask the consultants. I mean, and a lot of this, to your point, we're relying on professional engineers and people who have studied this and know the best practices for these
Shouldn't that have
for these
been done
dimensions and all that
before
stuff.
we brought it to the public? Shouldn't we know, hey, we're going
It
to...
is, I think.
we're
I think you'll
asking
get
you-
a satisfying answer if you come to the workshop at 5 o'clock and you go up to the guy from Stantec and you ask him those questions. I'm sure he can provide you with satisfactory answers.
Shouldn't that be available to us before we go? So that we're all
Well, it can be-
informed?
I'll
Shouldn't
try to
the-
get you whatever I can. I think you have to focus on like specific elements though, because there is a lot of documentation having to do with this project. So like if you said, can you show me the dimensions for this crosswalk or something like that, I'm sure we could accommodate that.
Shouldn't that all be available to us already?
We're doing the best we can. We're trying to package this information in a digestible way. I know that's what the consultants are doing. We have our public information officer that's doing that. We're putting out regular updates, answering frequently asked questions, all that stuff. So,
But
and
we should
I've
have
talked to you
access to
one-on-one,
that.
and I've
Yeah.
tried to give you specific information.
So is there access to all that stuff online somewhere? Or
It's
will
all
there
on
be?
the city's website. I mean, we'll continue to add stuff as we get questions and all that.
I searched as recent as last night.
Well, yeah, I mean,
You just have to ask for specific information, and I'll try to get it.
so
I'll try to get it for you.
Can you try to get dimensions on what the circle dimensions would
Oh,
be
I
as
know.
compared to? Okay.
I know now what it is. We're working with an engineer. I believe it's 100 feet wide, 140 in length, so it's more like an oval.
I don't know about
And
that. You got to look at.
average
I got to look
tractor
at
trailer
the.
truck
Well, if you
probably
could-
couldn't make the
But
trip.
I can
Yeah,
tell
if
you
you
that
could
the
get that
city
for
would
us, that
never
would be awesome.
choose something that A, emergency services wouldn't be able to navigate, or B, wouldn't be passable by DOT approved vehicles and stuff like that. There are regulations and standards having to do with that, and the city would never accept anything that didn't meet those standards.
So do you think this proposal meets those standards?
It has to if we're going with it. It's gotta meet those standards. And I'm relying on a licensed professional who
If this building went
knows
on
knows
fire
the
right
standards.
now,
Is there a verification that you guys will do after you get this proposal? Will there be
There are
an
a lot-
outside entity that scrutinizes this and makes sure that, this is the thing that,
Well, you do have two entities that would be working on it. You'd have our city engineer and all of the various department heads that would review any of this stuff. And then you have Stantec and whoever might get hired as a design engineer to put their stamp of approval on it. Literally, they would have to stamp the plans and say, I'm a licensed engineer, and this.
So
and
would
I
somebody
think this is
verify
okay.
Stantec's plans though, just to ensure that
Our city engineer and our city staff, and then if we needed someone else to take a look at it, we'd do that, I'm sure.
All right. Well, it sounds like there's more to come on that one. So yeah, I mean, if you
Yeah,
could get
and
us
again,
dimensions
that
on
gets
all
into
that.
sort of final design too, which is going to happen once we choose
But we're asking
some of
the
these
public
design
to approve a
elements.
design that might not even be possible for emergency services.
No, that's not true.
If
Everything.
Timoleons went on fire right now and Main Street was a single lane, a fire truck comes, say they could make that circle, and the fire
Every
truck pulls
plan.
up.
Let me just put it. Every plan that is on the table, or every option, has been evaluated and is okay. It's not going to inhibit our emergency response in any way.
Where would the fire truck
Believe
park?
that or not, but that's.
Where
that's
would the fire
facts.
truck park? Just common sense. I don't need a degree of any sort. There's a fire in front of Timoleons, and it's a single lane.
No, it's 2 lanes.
Am I talking about the right place?
The only place that it wouldn't be 2 lanes is a very short stretch going south on Main Street coming out of the
Is it
proposed roundabout.
single lane coming up?
Nope. 2 lanes. 2 lanes everywhere except for a small spot going into the proposed roundabout on the south side of going side of Main Street. Everything else is 2 lanes.
That's where, isn't that where I'm talking about? In front of what store is it single lane?
Just right at the top of the square here, basically.
Miranda's?
Yeah.
All right.
For a short stretch, and then it goes back to 2.
All
At
right.
least that's what
So,
what the design.
Miranda's
looks like.
goes up in flames. Fire truck comes. Fire truck
It would
blocks.
still be within the. It would still be there.
If there was a fire here at Poorhouse, fire department has to come down Washington Street, come around,
I don't know.
and
I
then
think
go
we're getting into
on.
a level of detail that
let's start
safety.
I'm just not
right.
familiar
Well,
with.
let's start with this. Let's get we talked about this earlier, right? The dimensions of what that circle would look like. Let's get that information and have John take a look at it. And you go
I
from
mean,
there.
the city would never do anything. There are standards that we'd have to meet. So, like, they're not going to design anything that would prohibit our emergency services from
I gotta edit
responding.
that out.
Like,
I
we
just said
just
the
wouldn't.
F word.
I haven't seen a safety plan. I'll go back and look, but maybe there's no minutes.
I
to
mean, you
that
can not
meeting.
believe it, but that's we
Well,
just
I don't-
wouldn't
I
we
don't-
wouldn't
I
do
don't-
that.
I don't think it's a question of not believing it, George. I think it's just a question in general, right? It's just there's no documentation on the dimensions of what that would look like. So
Well, the whole square. John helped me with the size of the common, or the egg about, or whatever.
let's
And these
George,
are all good
right,
questions to
exactly,
bring
but-
to the workshops and ask the people who designed it, ask the engineer who designed it, and say, they're going to be they're going to be in a better position to respond.
Well, I mean, if you're willing to provide it to us,
I'll try to
what the
provide you.
dimensions are,
Yeah.
that'd be great, and we'll go from there. And then next podcast, we'll probably ask more questions for you. That's all.
Sure.
It is what it is. Dory's just trying to do her own due diligence, right? I mean, as every other business owner in the
I have a
town
lot
is
to
trying to do.
lose, and so do the rest of these
So
businesses.
that's all. It's not.
Absolutely.
We're
Have a
not trying to
lot to
slam you,
lose.
George. Not trying to egg you on. Not trying to do anything.
I know that.
It's I mean, Dory has the best interests of Keene and her own properties in mind. That's all.
Absolutely.
And I just want to be here
I own
to
a good
create a
chunk
platform.
of Central
Right.
Square.
Exactly. So,
Both businesses on each side, believe me.
hey, can you keep it down over there, please? All right. Well, we got to wrap this thing up because,
Thank
otherwise it's going to be a 4-hour podcast and nobody wants to do that.
Yeah, nobody listens
Yeah,
to
we
those.
may have to have some martinis or something on the table to get that going. But, George, we appreciate you coming in. We really do. And,
Sure.
And, I'm looking forward to the next one. So,
Anytime.
Me too. Thank you.
Dory, thanks for your time. George, you guys have a great day. And your plate is full. So I'm gonna end it there. But thank you, George.
Thank you.
Have a great day.